What would you say about you mentioned having glimpses yourself of being in flow playing poker, and you've obviously watched a lot of video of executives in meetings
Yeah.
or in calls or watching people play poker. Is there any metrics that you really study, whether kind of HRV or skin conductivity or anything that you what
So
just you get to the metrics of
yeah,
flow
this
interview?
is one of the things we're doing in our third study. We're using like LiDAR and a bunch of other LiDAR, and everybody's wearing these Empatica tools and really looking at it. I mean, from a behavioral observation, like at a poker table, the flows in the eyes and gaze direction, there's a precision and a movement that goes on with certain players where it's like, oh, they're in it. Like
Mhm.
they're in it, and they're not checking their phone. They're and remember, like, I think flow is, people think it's sports a lot. And it's studied in sports, but it happens day to day. Like I get flow when I'm public speaking. That's my highest version of flow ever. Um, and then the second, sometimes writing, like I'm really in that thing. But like with poker, I really think if you look at some of these people, they might have just extended amount of flow. Like you might be like, oh my God, this person's in flow for way outside of what we normally would see. Um, and I don't think that's everyone. And I don't think they can replicate that all the time. And I don't think but there are moments, and I've seen games that I've broken down where I'm like, oh my God, this person's like a hawk right now. Like, and it's just that insane level. But also we can't always confuse focus with flow, right? So from a behavioral observation perspective, that could just mean high levels of focus. It doesn't necessarily mean flow. But sometimes you just get a feeling that someone's in that, oh, they're in that zone. It feels like that more so.
Right on. So let's, before we talk about the dark side of flow, I'd like to go maybe a little bit deeper into any kind of performance practices that you might teach with your clients. So things
Yeah.
like
Um,
pre-performance routine or imagery and any of that. And I want to do it just through perhaps a lens. And if this is helpful,
yeah,
great.
let's do
Not,
it.
let's not use this lens. So at the Flow Research Collective, we talk a lot about how to identify and kind of optimize flow triggers. So these
Okay.
are that drive our attention to be in the present moment and reduce the amount of thinking, that kind of cognitive overload that will get us stuck into our heads. So, I don't know if that's a helpful framework for you at all to like, how you've helped people identify flow triggers to drop them in. Maybe there's
Interesting.
two separate questions there, but yeah, I'm curious of the practices that you might kind of teach your clients and
Yeah. I mean, so I think the biggest practice for me and what I bring up is environment.
Mhm.
So it's looking at what environmental triggers are preventing that from actually occurring. So for me, it was something like on this call, like don't want anything else to be going on. Like I really love the iPhone and Apple's focus feature because it blocks the messages on all my devices. And I'm like, all right. So it's like, what environmental things are going to take you out of it? And I don't think people do enough of a job setting up their environment for success. Like I'm on a meeting with the coaching call, and like, I was in a meeting with, and my client, her assistant came in like 4 times during the call. And I'm like, listen, we got 20 minutes here. Like, where is that? So looking at like, okay, do you know the 5 why process?
tell
It
me,
was,
yeah, tell us about
so
it.
basically, I think it was a Japanese car manufacturer, I'm pretty sure, but they were looking at problems on an assembly line, and they use this mechanism called 5 whys to figure out what the problem was. So it's like all of a sudden something broke, and they'd ask 5 whys to get at the root of the problem. I tend to go through a process with that with a client. And it's more abstract. So sometimes it's like, all right, you had too much caffeine and that's why you're not able to perform. Or sometimes it's like, you didn't take care of this and didn't take care of that. So I think that modality is probably how I would be approaching that more than anything else,
Mhm.
um, to get at the source. And I'm really big about setting up your environment for success because that's something you have full control over.
Yeah.
Uh, don't
Yeah.
have that in other areas, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So distraction management is certainly a big part. You mentioned earlier a little bit about kind of internal approaches, kind of teaching how to reframe, how to develop meaning, and uh,
Yeah.
yeah, there's specific practices. Certainly, there's a lot
I
of
mean, there's a
that.
couple of like, there's a couple of neuro enhancers and stuff like that. I have had this is not medical advice, but I've had great success with nicotine gum.
Yep.
Very
Absolutely.
small amounts of nicotine gum as a cognitive enhancer. For me, it puts me in a great state. I've had my clients use the same exact thing. I think that everybody also, and I don't know for what this is worth, but fasting as well.
Mhm.
I don't know the research on that, but I do know that for a couple of clients, including myself, I only perform at high level. Whenever I have to do a high performance task, I'm almost always in a fasted state. And just logically, I don't think people really get how cumbersome digestion is as a process.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that takes away from it. Sometimes, just like tough love statements,
Mhm.
like sometimes people need to be like jolted out of it. It's
Mhm.
like, listen, what are you doing? Like, you're a professional, like stop it, stop the complaining. And that's what they need. Other times it's compassion. Like it's so variability. Like I know for myself, like when I do things, like sometimes a certain whisper in my ear works. Like certain times I put on a David Goggins podcast and that's the energy I need. I need man up and let's go. Right. And
Yeah.
other times I need a hug, So it's about knowing what that person needs in that moment. And I really don't believe that that's as standardized as we'd like to think. And I really would, my opinion about this is we're looking for this formulaic approach to reaching a state when in reality, it's probably more of like a framework based approach of like question 1, question 2, question 3, question 4, then the nicotine and coffee, like that kind of thing.
Stephen often talks about how he hates Stephen Kotler when people ask him, what are the 3 things I can do on
Yeah,
Monday?
I hate that. Yeah.
No.
It drives me crazy. Any questions of like, what are the 3, like, because
Yeah.
the human behavior is so inherently complex, but also I really, so gratitude is something but gratitude has been used. So when I mean gratitude, so I do this process. This is helpful. This is what I love. I do this thing where, um, I call it, reality, history, gratitude. So what I do is I talk to the client and I'm like, all right, so let's get at the reality of the situation. And they go back and forth. I use this on a client recently where financially they were potentially going to lose a lot of money, which wouldn't have had any sort of effect on their day-to-day life. So we did that. We do the reality process. And like, okay, you're going to be fine if this doesn't work. Yeah, I'm going to be fine.
Mhm.
And then I pull in a historical context. And I say like, all right, so just so we're clear, if we went back to like the Mongolian Empire
Mm.
and you were, you were an aristocrat or whatever at that time, you'd probably get your head chopped off tomorrow. Right. And then there's like a laugh and a lightness to it. And then it's gratitude. And when I say it's gratitude, it's not just like, oh, I'm grateful. It's like, all right, close your eyes. Like you're not being attacked. You're not being safe. Your family's safe. What a great look at all you've accomplished. Like, and get them to be really grateful for that. And that tends to like jolt a lot of people out. So it's a process I use a lot, like reality, history, gratitude.